Hey there, welcome back. Glad you decided to return for another reading from the Dim Light Library. When we think about maritime tragedies, most of us immediately think of the Titanic. Tonight's story is about a disaster that most of us today, and honestly, the majority of those at the time, have never really heard about. This is a story about the steamboat disaster that was overshadowed by a presidential assassination. The Sultana was a Mississippi River steamboat commanded by Captain James Cass Mason. On the morning following President Abraham Lincoln's assassination, James Mason loaded up the Sultana with newspapers and headed south to spread the news. Upon reaching Vicksburg, Mississippi, Mason had a visit with Captain Reuben Benton Hatch, the chief quartermaster at Vicksburg. Hatch had a proposal for Mason. Thousands of recently released Union prisoners of war had been brought to a parole camp nearby and needed to be transported north. The U.S. government was offering between $2.75 and $8 for every soldier transported north. Hatch guaranteed Mason a full load of 1,000 men if Mason agreed to provide him a kickback on the payment. There was a huge problem, though. The Sultana had a maximum legal capacity of only 376 passengers, a number well shy of the 1,000 promised by Hatch. And as it turns out, Hatch had actually under-promised, not by a few dozen men, not by a few hundred. On the night of April 24th, 1865, the Sultana set sail with a total of 2,127 people aboard, 1,950 prisoners, 22 guards, 70 fare-paying cabin passengers, and 85 crew members. Mason and the Sultana managed to travel for 2 days and reach Memphis, Tennessee, unloading around 200 men and supplies before continuing north. This would be the last stop the Sultana ever made. At 2 a.m. on April 27th, about 7 miles north of Memphis, the boilers on the Sultana suddenly and violently exploded, instantly ending many people's lives. The initial explosion completely destroyed the pilot house, and with no way to steer the boat, the Sultana became a drifting, burning inferno. The explosion sent some passengers into the river and ripped a 30-foot hole in the steamer. Its twin smokestacks fell, one into the blasted hole and the other onto a crowded section of the upper deck. This caused the upper deck to collapse onto the middle deck, trapping many in the wreckage. The collapsing decks created a steep slope that led directly into the exposed furnace boxes below. By the time the fires burned out and the survivors were rescued, the exact death toll was impossible to determine. Modern estimates suggest that roughly 1,164 people lost their lives that night, and nearly 800 others survived thanks to the crews of the Bostona, the Silver Spray, the Jenny Lind, the Pocahontas, the Navy ironclad USS Essex, and USS Tyler. In the end, no one was held responsible for this avoidable tragedy, in part due to the fact that the Lincoln assassination was still the #1 news story. Of the 2 men who were ultimately responsible for this disaster, Mason died in the explosion, and Hatch went into hiding and was never brought in to face his crimes. Greed led 2 men to endanger the lives of over 2,000 people. A news cycle engulfed in the assassination of the free world's leader allowed the crime to go unpunished. And more than 150 years later, the Sultana is remembered by few. Yet, on a quiet stretch of the Mississippi River, it claimed more lives than the Titanic ever would. Thank you for joining me in the Dim Light Library tonight. Until next time, remember to keep a light on for a good story.